Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is Weekend Edition, and we have an opportunity to kind of look back over this last week. Republican National Convention. Next week, the Democratic National Convention. And in studio with us, as always, Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. Monday night, of course, was Make America Safe Again. Tuesday was Make America Work Again. Wednesday, Make America First Again. And last night, Make America One Again. Going to have a chance to hear some of the comments by Donald Trump as well as by his daughter Ivanka, and lots to cover today. Some perspective perhaps on Mike Pence, and so and probably a few comments about Ted Cruz as well. Penna Dexter, what are your thoughts? You've been watching it all week.
I've been watching it, and certain speeches stand out, and of course the one everyone was waiting for was last night. So as I look at the news today and you hear some of the leftist media and the White House calling Donald Trump's speech a dark speech, I thought, well, he was basically telling it like it is. And every night of the convention that you mentioned, make America safe again, make America wealthy again. I mean, these are areas in which we have room for improvement. And I think what the left sees is the decline in certain areas, the rise of ISIS, the killing of cops all over the country, the economic malaise in a certain sector of the economy. These to them they're the starting point. And to many of us, it's not. It should be a temporary situation that we need to fix in certain ways. And this is why I think Donald Trump has done so well, because people see him, rightly so or not, as somebody who would lead us out of these issues and these problems. So we've got a choice between Hillary Clinton, who we know is going to move us to the left even further, and we've got Donald Trump, who there's some unknowables and unknowns about him, but the choice is between those two. And really, that's where the choice is. As much as, some people might look at write-in candidates or libertarian, and these are the choices. And so the convention sort of highlighted that.
Kelly Shackelford.
Well, I think if the Democrat, if they continue this approach of, well, it was dark, things are actually great in the country. I mean, if they get in that kind of a back and forth, I think that's not going to work out too well for them. I think if Trump, Trump's got some problems with being staying on message, right? But if he was a normally good politician, and this election was about change, or 4 more years of the last 8 years, Trump wins. The country wants change. I think that's pretty clear. They want it change. Both parties, right? You have these uprisings going on. The malaise is so bad that, Democrats are getting behind. We're getting behind, feel the burn, right? And then Republicans are getting behind both Trump and Cruz. So I don't think they want that discussion. So I think that's going to be hard for them. What are they going to do this next week? Are they going to come out and say, things are great in the country? Are they going to push forward? Don't you want 4 more years of what you just had 8 years of? They can't go full bore on that because it's not going to work. People are going to react to it. As one of the stats that Donald Trump laid out last night, which everybody recognizes, liberal conservative, is true. Average family household income is down $4,000 a family in the last 8 years. That's not good. And people know it's not good. And that's just one of many of these, they're watching cops being shot. They're watching ISIS, that didn't even exist when Obama came into office as any sort of force. So they're seeing all these things they don't like. So I think that back and forth is probably not a good discussion for the Democrats, because then it's, do you want change or do you want what we've got now? And if that would be a normal election discussion if we didn't have Trump and Hillary, who everybody's got, I don't like them. If that is, the narrative, then I think change is going to win.
Yes. 93 million out of work, 50 million below the poverty line, 46 million on food stamps. 1 in 5 households do not have anyone in the household working.
Wow.
And then, like you said, the median family income has dropped $4,000 in just 8 years. The only way you can argue that is to say, because of all these needs, that's why we need more big government. That's probably the argument you're going to get next week. But I think the argument this week is, We need to get people off of the welfare rolls and into the work. We need to bring jobs back to America, and we need to make sure that people have an opportunity to control their own future. So that'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I thought the speech last night said what Donald Trump needed to say, and mainly it was not all about Donald Trump. It was, I'm here to fight for you. I'm here to win for you. And I think that's a very good message for him to give. I didn't think it was the greatest delivery of a speech. I thought there's better orators, but I think it'd be fascinating, and I guess we will see over the next few days or whatever, the polling or whatever, of how the American people, that just the regular Joe that watched that, accepted that, or how it came across to them.
Yeah, the convention, one of the goals was to provide unity within the Republican Party. And you had different people speaking. You had, the Paul Ryans of the world speaking. You had Mike Pence, who did a great speech. And then you had Donald Trump's speech, and a lot of the things that he says he will do, the way he couches things is he's going to do this. You need me. I'm the one to do it, and all of that. Truly, though, the solutions are going to come from, yes, the White House, also the Congress, and the people. And so, there is hope for America. There's a positive message. I don't think the convention closed with the unity that had been hoped for. But that doesn't mean that over time and from now until November, that cannot evolve.
I think there's going to be the same problem on the Democratic side.
Yeah,
there are a lot of Democrats who were Bernie supporters who are not happy about Hillary. And will there be most of them jump in line just like they did with Trump? Sure. But that poll, to me, that where they actually polled people on whether they thought Hillary Clinton should have been indicted, and when 30% of the Democrats said she should have, they've obviously got a serious divide as well. So that's not going to be one side. I know we don't have time now, but I've really been thinking about this election, and I think there are some things that people haven't been thinking about, and that I've come to see as I've watched a little more closely, and I think there's a lot more. There's a lot. People present it like Donald Trump is definitely the underdog. He's probably going to get blown away. All this kind of stuff. And I think there's some things that people aren't noticing, that it might be the exact opposite of that. And so we can discuss that. But I think there are some things that people haven't been talking about. And then obviously we've got to talk about the Ted Cruz and Donald Trump dust up, which even continues today.
Sure
and I think is sad. And again, we think back to when Ted Cruz would not criticize Donald Trump back in the campaign when they held a rally together for Iran.
I know. It's just hard to believe.
And where they are now. And it's totally switched. You almost don't remember that time now.
Certainly. And I want to get your comments about Mike Pence. We talked about it last week, but both of you weren't here, so we want to get your thoughts. We have a lot to cover. We will do that right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Recently, conservatives concerned about the accurate view of American history won a victory at the College Board. The College Board is a massive nonprofit organization responsible for the advanced placement exams as well as the SAT. The College Board is in the midst of revising the various AP tests. Last year, the College Board published the new guidelines for the AP history test. Daniel Hedinger says that they read like a left-wing obsession with identity, gender, class, crimes against the American Indian, and sins of capitalism. Stanley Kurtz complained that the College Board is turning itself into a national school board. He added that the current controversy is not just about the U.S. history exam, as important as that is. It's also about who is in charge of teaching our children. To understand the significance, consider that more than 2,600 colleges, including most Christian colleges, offer credit to students who do well on the AP exams. It also operates as a de facto monopoly by setting the agenda for the tests that are administered. So the current guidelines are very different from the ones posted last year. Why? Well, many of the states began to push back against what some have called the neo-Marxist guidelines. The College Board would actually lose lots of money and prestige if the states began to replace the tests with their own course material. The success in pushing back came in part because of the liberal progressives who pushed too far and too fast. Some conservatives argue that even the revisions are actually hostile to American ideals and ignore the positive impact of religion in America. But at least this is a small and significant victory for truth and for teaching American history, with an appreciation for the good as well as the bad chapters in our history. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford, and we have lots to cover today. Want to go back to the speeches in just a minute, but I thought I'd get an initial comment from both of you also about his vice presidential running mate. Last week, we spent some time talking about it, but of course, neither of you were here. And Mike Pence is an individual that some of us have known for some time. He received the Christian Statesman of the Year award a number of years ago from D. James Kennedy. Has described himself as a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. Individual that grew up in a Catholic family, became a Christian, and has served as a talk show host, a TV host, 12 years in Congress, and governor, to mention just a few. But you've had a chance to meet him, Penna, so what are your thoughts?
Yes, he was a frequent guest on Point of View when he was in Congress, when he was a leader. He was really the fourth most powerful position in Congress. And he was always willing to come on our show and talk about whatever issue was before Congress, explain it very well. He would explain it from a conservative policy point of view and a Christian point of view. So I really appreciate Mike Pence. And I was not hopeful. I was not actually rooting for him to be the nominee as for VP because he did disappoint us on Indiana's RFRA law, and he gutted it under pressure. So I thought, well, Trump really needs somebody who's going to stand up to him, and I thought Newt Gingrich would be that person. But now that Mike Pence is there, and I thought his speech was wonderful, and I remember, it just reminds me of the policy guy he is and how he's right on the issues and with his understanding. I hope that he is not pushed to the side and marginalized, but that Trump actually uses him as a good resource if they are elected. Because he really is a quality guy. He actually won the Values Voters Summit straw poll twice.
Yes.
So people, conservatives, movement conservatives saw him as presidential material. I thought it was, it spoke well for him that instead of running for president along with everyone else, he went and instead a few years ago back to his home state and ran for governor. And has done some very good things there, really improved the economy there. So if some of his policies and the things he's put in place in Indiana become policies of our federal government, great. He's going to be great. I think he'll be a great asset, depending on whether if Mr. Trump is elected, whether he actually gives him a strong and powerful role.
Yeah. Again, Values Voters Summit on two separate occasions said he should run for president. I know Marjorie Dannenfelser has been on this program with us before on a number of occasions, have really been encouraging him to run for president. So, Kelly, this is an individual that comes from the think tank world like you have and understands family policy on everything from marriage to life. I mean, I can't think of an issue that I disagree with on Mike Pence other than, of course, that one little glitch when he was governor and that issue of RFRA. What are your thoughts?
No, I think he's about as solid as you could pick, both on policy and as an individual. Just a strong person, believer, and really Ronald Reagan down the line, kind of all the issues. The fiscal people love him. Again, he's got the one problem, which was, I don't think a matter of issue. It wasn't like he, and this sort of makes it a little more problematic, was what Penna was referencing. He knows what's right on religious liberty, and he failed in courage on that moment in Indiana. And for those who don't remember, what happened is they were passing a basic religious freedoms law, and the gay and lesbian groups went crazy after they passed it. It really was. It didn't even mention gay and lesbian. It's just talking about religious freedom. Same approach we've had here for 100 years. And they got, because the Human Rights Campaign has this connection with all these major corporations now, they hooked into all these corporations, and all of a sudden all these corporations were telling Indiana, well, we're going to leave your state. We're not going to do business in your state, which somewhat panicked, evidently, Governor Pence and put pressure on him, and he made a horrible mistake. They pulled the bill back up, and they essentially, what they said is, you have religious freedom as long as it doesn't deal with any issues of sexual orientation. Which, I mean, literally would mean you could be, put in, if they wanted to, you could be put in jail for having the wrong beliefs on, gay marriage, and there'd be no religious freedom protection in Indiana. Is that the law you want in Indiana? So a really bad decision. I will say this, though. This session, before any of this presidential talk occurred, there was an attempt to continue to move in that direction. And not only was it stopped, but Governor Pence was key in stopping it. So I think he learned his lesson. He kind of was in the midst of a crisis and made a poor mistake, realized he made a poor mistake. And so that's the only blemish he's got on his record. I think he would correct that blemish if he would say that publicly to, the community that, the Christian community that, I made a mistake there.
Yeah, we'll see if that comes
so
up too.
Besides that, you're not going to find anybody as perfect on all the issues through all these years and doing all the right things as Mike Pence.
And able to articulate it well. You had mentioned, Kerby, that he was a talk show. He had a talk show before ever running for office. And he does articulate the conservative message well, and he underpins it with his faith. And so he does that so beautifully, and I think that's just great.
Well, again, we want to get to some of the speech, and we'll do that probably in just a minute, but might as well deal with the other elephant in the room, and that's Ted Cruz. Any thoughts about that? There are individuals that have reacted very differently. As a matter of fact, after it happened, I said I was watching first the Twitter feeds and then listening to talk radio, and individuals that actually did not like Donald Trump thought what he did was great. People that were already on board with Donald Trump thought it was terrible. And then you have another group of those that always have hated Ted Cruz. He's managed to have a few enemies, and they think this is the end of his political career. Charles Krauthammer said it was the longest suicide note he'd ever heard. So, obviously some people wonder what about the future of the senator from Texas. But, Penna, what are your thoughts?
Well, the people at Fox, because I was watching it on Fox, of course, they were the people, they've never really liked him, and they talked about his suicide and, that it was really sort of treasonous to do what he did, not to endorse. I may be different from a lot of the folks. I didn't want him to endorse Trump because I just felt that Trump has not proven that he will be faithful to the Constitution. And that's Ted Cruz's core. And so he needs to show us, at least tell us, that he will be faithful to the Constitution in the various policy areas. I wasn't bothered by it, but the booing started, and whether the booing was orchestrated by the Trump campaign or just more spontaneous, I have no idea. I understand that the Trump campaign and the RNC saw the speech beforehand and knew he wouldn't endorse, so it shouldn't have been a surprise to them. So, I think we're all upset about it. I think Ted Cruz could have said some other things and different things that would have been more unifying. I wish he had in some sense, but I do not fault him for not endorsing Donald Trump. And I think that we will see some things happen going down the road toward the election that will make us sort of forget about this.
As you said, they used to be together. I mean, they were joined at the hip, and then to have this unfold. Kelly, any thoughts?
Well, Ted's a friend of mine, and one of our, he's volunteered on our cases. So I was watching it, and I kind of felt like the crowd because I was not knowing for sure if he was going to come around and, again, not necessarily endorse, but just say some things.
Yeah. He doesn't have to endorse, but say, well, there really is a difference, as we're going to see in just a minute, between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump on foreign policy. We're going to play that right after the break.
And those kind of things. And so when I saw where it was going at the end, I broke my heart to watch what was happening. And look, he either did it for one of two reasons. And that's going to be the interesting thing. It was either because what happened with Donald Trump in attacking his wife, which was not just wrong, it was evil what Donald Trump did and how he attacked his wife. So I understand. And attacking his father with a ridiculous charge that's almost cartoonish. But it was either that, which is one of the things that Senator Cruz said the next day
in the Texas
when he was
delegation.
asked, or it was that Ted Cruz is about these principles, and he sees a guy who doesn't look totally committed to these principles, and Ted Cruz was saying, look, I'm about the principles. If you'll come along behind these principles, this is how you can win. But I can't support someone publicly who I think is just about themselves and not about the constitutional principles. And so was it one or both of those? I don't know. Will this help or hurt him? I think the odds are it hurts him because I think most Republicans had already decided they're still going to support Trump. And so, he kind of angered all those people. But 4 years from now, if Donald Trump gets massacred in this election and people look back and go, well, who was smart enough not to stand with this craziness? Maybe it redounds to his benefit, but it sure felt bad to watch.
Sure did. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to have a chance to hear from the speech last night by Donald Trump. And, of course, we'll open up the phones to give you a chance to join our conversation. 1-800-351-1212.
What does a hero look like? I remember a woman stricken with MS. She was in a wheelchair, and every week after church, people would get down on a knee and greet her and pray for her. But do you know what caught my eye? The seemingly invisible man behind the wheelchair, silently caring for his beloved, sacrificing for her. In the Bible, Jesus talked about a big giver who had a marching band come with him as he dumped his treasure in the temple coffers. But Jesus saw a woman who gave a tiny gift that was actually huge. If you appreciate Point of View but can't give $30 or $65 or more, well, get this. If every listener gave $5, it would pay our bills for the next 3 years. 3 years. Give $5 today. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net. Or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Thank you for being our hero. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, the lines are filling up. 1-800-351-1212. Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford is our weekend edition. And before we take some of the calls, and we have a lot more to talk about, I did want to at least give you a chance to hear a little bit from Donald Trump last night. So the first one has to do with his comparison of what happened in foreign policy before and after Hillary Clinton. Here's what he had to say.
America is far less safe, and the world is far less stable than when Obama made the decision to put Hillary Clinton in charge of America's foreign policy. Let's defeat her in November. Okay? I am certain that it was a decision that President Obama truly regrets. Her bad instincts and her bad judgment, something pointed out by Bernie Sanders, are what caused so many of the disasters unfolding today. Let's review the record. In 2009, pre-Hillary, ISIS was not even on the map. Libya was stable. Egypt was peaceful. Iraq was seeing, and really a big reduction in violence. Iran was being choked by sanctions. Syria was somewhat under control. After 4 years of Hillary Clinton, what do we have? ISIS has spread across the region and the entire world. Libya is in ruins, and our ambassador and his staff were left helpless to die at the hands of savage killers. Egypt was turned over to the radical Muslim Brotherhood, forcing the military to retake control. Iraq is in chaos. Iran is on the path to nuclear weapons. Syria is engulfed in a civil war, and a refugee crisis now threatens the West. After 15 years of wars in the Middle East, after trillions of dollars spent and thousands of lives lost, the situation is worse than it has ever been before. This is the legacy of Hillary Clinton: death, destruction, terrorism, and weakness. But Hillary Clinton's legacy does not have to be America's legacy. The problems we face now, poverty and violence at home, war and destruction abroad, will last only as long as we continue relying on the same politicians who created them in the first place. A change in leadership is required to produce a change in outcomes.
So again, just a little bit. First of all, of course, foreign policy, pre-Hillary Clinton, post-Hillary Clinton, and then also another theme that ran through this. If you're going to solve the problem, you need to change the leadership because the system is rigged. Penna, any comments?
Well, I thought that this was one of the best parts of the speech. It was long on specifics, which is something we've been looking for. And, he blamed Clinton for really the last decade and a half of some of our failures. So some of it preceded her, but she certainly has not been helpful. Also, the way he talked about a little bit later, Americanism and not globalism will be our credo. I think that speaks to many, many people who have not actually been heard in the last couple of decades. And so, in a sense, that was good. Later, he also said, I only want to let people into our country who will support our values and love our people. So a lot of that speech, the parts of that speech on foreign policy were strong and I think encouraging. But then, as always, he is so positive about how much he can do to fix that. And these things don't happen quickly. And so you kind of like to hear how somebody is going to work with Congress to do it. I don't think we're ever going to hear that from him. But, if he's elected, hopefully we'll see everybody working together to accomplish some of this.
Next week, you're going to hear, there are all these promises, but can he really achieve that? Of course, it's difficult because we heard a lot of promises from Barack Obama and didn't get there either. But, okay, Kelly, this sounded pretty dark, but I think it was a realistic assessment of what's happening around the world.
I think most people understand how much more dangerous things have gotten, and so much so that they're even on our soil. ISIS has gone from not even being JV to now being one of the biggest problems and leading to, these attacks in America. So, people realize that. Penna's point's a really good one. A lot of the stuff that Donald Trump talks about, I think he's very confident. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. The place where that's probably very true is in foreign policy.
Yeah.
Because the president, under the Constitution, has authority, much more authority in foreign policy. So he can do a lot of things unilaterally, foreign policy-wise. And if I had to summarize the entire foreign policy issue, I would say that most people feel like Donald Trump is strong and Hillary Clinton is weak. They feel the same way about Barack Obama. He's been weak on foreign policy, and that weakness has invited a lot of mischief and a lot of problems. And so I think my guess is what the Democrats will have to attack Trump is he's strong, but he's dangerous. But I do think that that's one of his strongest arguments. And I think this is one of the strongest issues. I think national security, security is one of the most important issues. And he's not only does he have it tied to the foreign policy, but now it's real easy. And if you listen to what happened last night, the foreign policy shifts right into the police in the United States.
That's what they did Monday night. Yeah, we played some of those.
Do you want
clips.
Law and order? Do you want, strength so that we have, things run well? Or do you want this sort of malaise, this sort of weakness that leads to the kind of chaos that we now see erupting around our country? So I think that's one of his strongest arguments. I think that's probably what he leads with. The thing I've been surprised about is the thing I would think he would really lead with, and I've heard some, but nowhere near what I thought I would hear, is the economy.
I thought so too. But if you talk to everybody, whether it's Governor Rick Scott from Florida or Newt Gingrich, almost all of them say jobs and ISIS. So
that's exactly right. And
but
you just didn't hear that with him.
His surrogates are on message, but sometimes he's not on message.
And I think most people would buy that because most people, they're not sure that he knows a lot about a lot of things, but the one thing that they think he does know about is business. He knows about economy and jobs. He's put a lot of people to work, and that's a real strength for him. And so he didn't really lead out of that a lot, but maybe people take that for granted with him.
I'm thinking, though, Kelly, the point you made that the president has a lot more sway over foreign policy, can do things unilaterally, whereas on jobs, it's not, even the government can't do all that much. There are a lot of forces outside government. So in a sense, maybe that's smart not to make too many promises, but he has made a lot of promises that he has people's backs. And, if you can get government out of the way in many of these areas and back off on the regulations and lower taxes, the economy will come back. But, if there are a lot of government programs to help people, that will be a problem. And, I think a lot of us will look at that and say that's a little bit too authoritarian. So, we're not getting specifics. We have heard from his surrogates like Steve Moore. I heard him speak over the weekend, and it was incredible. So if Donald Trump allows the Steve Moores and the Larry Kudlows to run things, well, great, things will be good.
And again, your point about safety, first night was, of course, Make America Safe Again. You had Sheriff David Clark, who was the sheriff of Milwaukee County. And so that was all the police issue. But then you had Mayor Rudy Giuliani talking about police and then going into ISIS. So I think that whole safety issue relates both to the law enforcement and to defense. So that's something as well. Got a full bank of phone calls. We'll come back and take some of those as we go to a break. Let me just mention that we always play the commentary by Penna Dexter, and we're going to talk with her a little bit later about the governor of North Carolina. I know some of you that are North Carolinians would appreciate her commentary. You can listen to it online right now. We'll talk more about that with her as we continue down the program. Let's take a break. We'll take those calls right after this.
Over the past few months, we have witnessed the emergence of a controversy over an issue most of us never saw coming. We have seen local governments and now the federal government attempting to force schools, businesses, and nonprofit organizations to open the showers, changing facilities, locker rooms, and bathrooms designated for women and girls to biological males, and vice versa. No elected official I know of has asked to be faced with this issue, but I met one the other evening who confronted it with great resolve and courage. He is Pat McCrory, governor of North Carolina. The governor described the day Chad Griffin, president of the Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest LGBT advocacy organization, sat in his office and told him that North Carolina was the epicenter of his organization's efforts to make gender identity the means for people to enter restrooms and locker rooms. What the HRC wants, says Governor McCrory, is a third status in addition to male and female: questioning. They want the few who are questioning whether they really want to be the sex they are anatomically to be able to use the facility of their choice. The HRC had already gotten to the city of Charlotte, which had placed a mandate on all private businesses to allow bathroom, locker room use based not on a person's biological sex, but on the gender identity they choose to identify as. The state swung into action to stop this craziness and to protect the security and privacy of its citizens. The legislature passed HB 2, the Public Facilities Privacy and Security Act, and Governor McCrory signed it. It affects public facilities. Private businesses and private universities and nonprofits can establish their own practices. The governor says North Carolina's schools and its rest stops were top of mind for him. How could he leave people using those bathrooms vulnerable? The response from the Human Rights Campaign was swift and sharp. Chad Griffin said to North Carolina, "You won't know what hit you." He wasn't kidding. Scores of companies said they'd rethink doing business in North Carolina. PayPal canceled a contract to build a 400-person call center. Deutsche Bank froze a 250-job expansion. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said HB 2 must be changed if the league's multi-day 2017 All-Star festivities are to remain in Charlotte. Bruce Springsteen and Ringo Starr canceled concerts. Conventions and events in the state were canceled. The federal government threatened to pull millions in education funding. Governor McCrory got wind of a civil rights lawsuit coming from the U.S. Justice Department. He sued them first, citing their baseless and blatant overreach in violation of the 10th Amendment. He was joined by 21 other states. Hours later, the Justice Department countersued. The left brought the issue to us, not the right. Many politicians have caved to these demands, but this governor is to be commended for standing strong. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
All through the program today, we'll play some of the clips from last night, but we also want to hear from you. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford, Weekend Edition. Let's head out first to Maine, WSEW. Mike, what were your thoughts about the convention?
Hi, Kerby. Hey, everybody. Thanks for taking my call. And by the way, great commentary, Penna. The convention went great. I was not excited about voting for Donald Trump prior to the convention. I was going to vote for him primarily for the Supreme Court judges that he was going to put in, but after watching his family, his speech was good. He spoke about a lot of good things, but his family really gave us a glimpse into who the man is. We see the rough exterior, we see his quickness to speak, and some of the things that might be flaws, but I think his family gave us an insight into who he is. I liked what Ivanka said last night about people that met in the Trump Towers that needed a break, and he was able to set them up with a job and things like that. And so those kind of things got me more interested in jumping onto the Trump train.
Very good. You know, again, you can't fake good kids, right? Isn't that a phrase?
No, that's really true. That's an accomplishment of his, and it's good to see it. I thought that Ivanka, and really the boys too, humanized him to some degree, and that was needed. They made him, they kind of showed his heart, and sort of Ivanka was trying to show that he really likes women and that he treats them and respects them. So that was...
Yeah, let me just play that real quickly.
helpful.
It's such a short piece, but Ivanka last night, some people thought she should run for president. They liked exactly what she had to say, and she had some comments about Donald Trump and how he treats women.
At my father's company, there are more female than male executives. Women are paid equally for the work that we do, and when a woman becomes a mother, she is supported, not shut out. Women represent 46% of the total U.S. labor force, and 40% of American households have female primary breadwinners. In 2014, women made 83 cents for every dollar earned by a man. Single women without children earn 94 cents for each dollar earned by a man, whereas married mothers made only 77 cents. As researchers have noted, gender is no longer the factor creating the greatest wage discrepancy in this country. Motherhood is. As president, my father will change the labor laws that were put in place at a time when women were not a significant portion of the workforce. And he will focus on making quality childcare affordable and accessible for all.
Well, that sort of seems to take an issue away from Hillary Clinton, which you know she would mention next week, right, Penna?
It takes an issue away from Hillary Clinton. It disturbs me a little bit if that's where the Republican Party is going.
Yeah.
One of the things that she mentions, and I think this does resonate with women, is that, when you become a mother, there are some career choices and issues that take place, but they are... in a sense, when you become a mother, you also have some divisions in your responsibilities. Most of the time, you are not able to contribute as much at the workplace. You make choices, and so companies make choices. So these are all realities that exist in our system of free enterprise, and to cover those over and to be able to fix them, I don't think is necessarily wise or possible, but I think there are some things that can be done. Most of them are decisions of the companies themselves. So that was the one part of her speech that worried me, actually. As a mother, I've seen this with my daughters-in-law and different decisions that have been made in their lives, but you have to remember that the company needs a full-time worker, and if that person is a mother and they've got to be here and there with the kids, then, those are decisions that are made and negotiations between the companies. So, I just wanted to throw that in there a little bit. It was impressive to hear, but there are certain realities.
And that's why I think we'll be talking about this, because if it surfaces again or becomes a policy issue, we certainly have depended on you over the years to kind of articulate some of those thoughts. Kelly?
I thought the first part of that clip you played and what she said was brilliant.
Yes.
Politically.
If Donald Trump hates women, why is it there are more women executives than men?
Exactly.
Right?
And
where's that come from?
Boy, when you're trying to eat into 75% of the women that didn't support him, at least the last major poll I saw, a month or so ago. What a great strategy. I mean, go right after that, and that was an excellent point. I think on the policy matter, I totally agree with Penna. I mean, there are people, she says the biggest discrepancy is women who are married versus women who are single for the very reason she said. Women who are married, are making a trade-off a lot of times. They're saying, you know what, I can't really be here full-time. I appreciate that you're letting me work, and, I'm not here full-time because I have other responsibilities with my kids. I'm trying to kind of do a couple of things here. Phyllis Schlafly might be, coming back out if we don't watch it here for what's going on there. But
that's why I put it on there, because I know we've been talking about that, But
I thought it was great. I thought, very impressed with her ability, the way she carried herself, her speech. I thought she obviously did a very good job introducing her father.
Yeah, and also Donald Trump Jr. and Eric. I mean, this is an impressive family. I've had some people say this is almost like the Kennedy family, but better, because there were some Kennedys at a convention. I'm old enough to remember when we had Kennedy kids speaking at those that were impressive. But I mean, this to a person, these were well done, don't you think?
You know, I was listening to Donald Trump Jr. speak, and there was a brief moment where I said to myself, I wish he were the nominee. But these kids, I mean, we have to remember they were pretty much Democrats or apolitical kids. And now they're articulating conservative values. At least the boys, I thought, did pretty well at doing that. And so, we'll watch them. And what I hope with Donald Trump is that he's tutored by the right people. Because I don't think he's long on specifics about policy. But if he has the right people around him, then, we could actually have reason to be hopeful.
Let me. There's a couple of analytics that I want. I'll throw one out. I don't know if I have time before the next break to do the other one. We can talk about the other one. But a lot of people look at this race and they say, "Oh, Hillary Clinton, she's just going to mop the floor with Donald Trump." And the more you look at it, I think you've got to ask yourself a question: whose campaign is part of a movement? I mean, I think if you look at what's going on the Democratic side and on the Republican side, the Bernie supporters, the Cruz and the Trump supporters, if you look at Brexit, if you look at these things that are happening, there is this wind blowing in a certain direction, and it's behind what Trump is trying to do. I don't see any such wind, any such movement behind the Hillary Clinton campaign. And I think there's something to be said for that. I mean, I understand this is about voting against the other guy, but I have never seen anybody win the election by being just against the other guy. The positive movement is always important, and I think that's being discounted a lot. And I think that it's one of those things where we could be shocked. I mean, we could get into the election and it could be that Trump just blows Hillary Clinton away, which I don't think most people are thinking about. Yeah. But you have to look at where the wind is blowing and where there is movement, and I think that really does that is sort of a thing that helps Trump, no matter who he is, just because of this movement that he's in the middle of that is behind him.
You talk about wind. If anything, there is a headwind that Hillary Clinton is going into, because there are a lot of Bernie supporters that are not thrilled with her candidacy. And you know as well as I do that enthusiasm is really key for a campaign, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think this movement that Kelly talks about, if the Republican establishment gets on board and tries to control it, it's not going to work. If they get on board and they work together and allow the party to shift, it could work. In fact, it could be very, very powerful.
A lot more to talk about in the second hour. We'll keep those phone calls and take those, but we need to take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
What can you get for $5? In most cases, you can't even get a value meal at a fast food restaurant. But I'll tell you one thing $5 can do. If every listener to Point of View sent just $5 this week, believe it or not, and someone here did the math, Point of View could pay the bills for the next 3 years. That's what the number said. $5, 3 years. That's how many of you there are and how little it takes to keep us going. The problem is, most of our listeners have never contributed. Never. To make up for those who don't, others give large gifts, hundreds, even thousands, or monthly donations of $30, $65, $100. I don't know what you can do, but I encourage you to do what you can today, even if that's $5. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send your gift to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Thank you for doing your part for Point of View. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour in his weekend edition, and we have an opportunity to talk about the Republican convention last night, looking ahead to the Democratic National Convention as well. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. As we always have around the round table, Penna, Dexter, Kelly, Shackelford. Let's head out to California. We started in Maine. Let's go to California now. KYCC. And Leslie, what would you like to say about the convention?
Hi, Kerby. Thank you for taking my call. I want to say that I thought Donald Trump gave a wonderful speech at the Republican convention last night. He touched on everything that touches the hearts of the American people. I see now why he has such a large grassroots following. I think he's just the person this country needs at this crucial time in our nation's history. And I saw a different man than what has been portrayed by any of the media. And I think if any other Republican candidate had received the nomination and become president, it would be business as usual. And that includes Ted Cruz. I'm voting for Donald Trump and urging the rest of conservative America to do the same.
Well, I appreciate your phone call. Let's set issue. We've had lots of people wanting to speak to that issue. So, Catherine in Texas, KBJS, I appreciate you calling, and I think you wanted to speak about Ted Cruz's speech the other night.
Yes, I did. I really appreciate Ted Cruz, and so does my friends, for not following after the crowd. We were glad that he stood up for his beliefs. I believe he is a Christian, and I believe God will bless him for standing up for what he believed in, his family and all. And the Bible says, when I'm weak, then am I strong. And the race doesn't always go to the strong. It's God that puts down one and lifts up another. And I hope that the evangelicals rub off on Mr. Trump so that he will become a great Christian and a great leader. I believe we should pray for him, that he will become a great leader, and I pray that the evangelicals will lift him up in prayer to God, and that God will bless whatever he's going to do. But he needs God, because Jesus said, without me, you can do nothing. He can't do anything unless God helps.
Yeah, I was struck by the fact that...
I appreciate you taking my call.
Thank you. I was struck by the fact that he talked about he owed a debt of gratitude to the evangelical and religious community. We had Jack Graham here in studio on Monday, and he's one of about 24 plus individuals that are providing some consultation to Donald Trump. So I don't know. I think that's kind of a positive. What do you think, Penna?
Oh, absolutely. And, he is short, as we've been saying, and I say this all the time, on policy. And so, since he is sort of an empty page on some things, if he's got the right people that are advising him and he's listening to them, and if he's grateful, if he said that he's grateful to evangelicals, then hopefully he will listen to some of these smart ones and some of the people that he's put on his committee. I really appreciate Catherine's call, because I do think this is true, that first of all, we don't have a choice between who we think is a strong evangelical and someone we don't. Right. We really don't think either of them are. But we can pray now for this nominee that God would touch him, that God would give him wisdom. If he becomes the president, that God would guide him, and certainly that he would have people around him that would be godly advisors. So, her encouragement in that direction, I think, was great. And thank you so much, Catherine, for that call.
Kelly, let me ask you about that because, here he said he was going to have at least two groups vet his nominees, and one is the Federalist Society, the other is the Heritage Foundation. Those, if you had written the speech, I don't think it would sound any different. If you had mentioned those two groups, those are the ones I think you would have picked, right? Weren't they?
Yeah, that'd be, you're going to get the most conservative judicial picks possible. So if he follows through on that promise, which he has made to many of us publicly, he would have the most conservative appointments to the federal bench, which are life appointments.
Yes.
Probably of any president in the history of the country. I think what Penna was talking about and Catherine calling in, you've got people who are believers who are struggling in the election because they look at the candidates and they think, you know what, they're both unacceptable to me. But I do think there's a difference in why. When you look at people and what they're saying, I think that there's sort of two levels at which you vote on people. One is, what are they like as a person? And we wish that our choices were, this guy is, or this gal is, they're just salt of the earth.
We wish they were Mike Pence.
Yes.
He's the kind of guy you'd love to have dinner with, right?
Exactly.
He's just an
Character,
unbelievably nice guy.
Character and everything else and nice and all that. But I think there's an agreement that, that a lot of people don't feel exactly that way about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. But I think there's a secondary question about every candidate. One is, do you like them? What are they like as a person? The second, though, is what are they going to do? What will they do or accomplish? And I think this is where Hillary Clinton is at a little bit of a deficit. They're treating it like people don't like Hillary, people don't like Trump, and that's true. But if you go a little deeper, what you're hearing, especially when you watch these focus groups and the things they're doing on TV, they don't like either one of them, but they don't think Hillary is going to do anything either. They think it's all
or do more of the same.
It's going to be the rigged system, the good old boy network, that you give a little cash in mine and I give that there's corruption and all this. Whereas with Trump, I don't think that's a deficiency that he has as much. They think he's a doer. They think he'll do things. They're not totally sure what he's going to do. But I think that it's being treated like those are the same. And I don't think they are. Because and there's just a trust, somebody who's sort of soiled by the system that applies to a Hillary that doesn't apply to a Trump. Mm-hmm. And so I think that comparison is going to end up being more favorable to Trump because people are going to say, I think something's going to be done here that's different that might help it. So I really think that analysis is something that hasn't been really thought through or looked at. But if you notice, listen to why people say they don't like them, if they say they don't like either one of them. And you'll see a lot of these people saying they're probably going to vote for Trump, even though they don't like either one of them.
Yeah, like Catherine, one thing I do disagree with is it's just not the media that's portrayed Trump. We have his tweets and his public insults of people. So we have that. But I think what this convention tried to do, and fairly successfully did do, was show his accomplishments and that he's a doer and that he's a good leader. I don't know that Hillary Clinton would be a good leader. What do we really have to show us that she's a good leader at all? We really don't have anything.
So now there's some downsides, right? Obviously, we've got the LGBTQ that obviously Donald Trump is going to be. This convention had a number of examples, and he's going to be pushing. He's going to be pushing some of this if he's president. So as Christians, you go, but would Hillary push those less?
Oh, no. They'd be a full-throated endorsement versus.
So there's some downside for those who listen to Point of View and are going, gosh, I don't have my perfect candidate. You certainly don't.
Kelly brought it up, so after the break, we'll have a chance to hear what first Donald Trump had to say about LGBTQ, and then Peter Thiel. So we'll talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Recently, conservatives concerned about the accurate view of American history won a victory at the College Board. The College Board is a massive non-profit organization responsible for the advanced placement exams as well as the SAT. The College Board is in the midst of revising the various AP tests. Last year, the College Board published the new guidelines for the AP history test. Daniel Hettinger says that they read like a left-wing obsession with identity, gender, class, crimes against the American Indian, and sins of capitalism. Stanley Kurtz complained that the College Board is turning itself into a national school board. He added that the current controversy is not just about the U.S. history exam, as important as that is. It's also about who is in charge of teaching our children. To understand the significance, consider that more than 2,600 colleges, including most Christian colleges, offer credit to students who do well on the AP exams. It also operates as a de facto monopoly by setting the agenda for the tests that are administered. So the current guidelines are very different from the ones posted last year. Why? Well, many of the states began to push back against what some have called the neo-Marxist guidelines. The College Board would actually lose lots of money and prestige if the states began to replace the tests with their own course material. The success in pushing back came in part because of the liberal progressives who pushed too far and too fast. Some conservatives argue that even the revisions are actually hostile to American ideals and ignore the positive impact of religion in America. But at least this is a small and significant victory for truth and for teaching American history, with an appreciation for the good as well as the bad chapters in our history. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition in studio with us today, Penna, Dexter, Kelly Shackelford as always. And if you would like to join the conversation, we'll get to some more phone calls in just a minute. But Kelly did mention that Donald Trump went out of his way to mention LGBTQ citizens. And this all has to do with the shooting there in Orlando.
As your president, I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens from the violence and oppression of a hateful foreign ideology. Believe me. And I have to say, as a Republican, it is so nice to hear you cheering for what I just said. Thank you.
Again, I know he's trying to build a bridge there, but at the end, it's almost like, well, it's good to know that Republicans actually want to protect the lives of LGBTQ.
Yeah,
it
wasn't like he was advocating in those comments, passing laws for LGBTQ. It was, he was saying, we will protect you from being murdered from Islamic radicals. I mean, I'm like, that is actually not,
it's not an issue,
no.
Or it better not be.
I don't know any parties, I mean, you have to find some, maybe Westboro Baptist or somewhere to find that. I mean, it's just not So I thought it was really odd. I thought that was odd.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't need to say that last part.
Yeah, and I put it in there because I thought it would kind of generate the conversation. But you have to remember what preceded it, and I thought we might just hear from Peter Thiel, again, who is the head of PayPal. And again, he really tried as hard as he could not to address that issue, but just to talk about the fact that from a tech point of view, this is amazing. Some of our nuclear plants still use floppy disks, and like, goodness, we really need to update all the things that need to happen around the country. But at the same time, he did want to make sure that everybody knew that he was homosexual.
Now we are told that the great debate is about who gets to use which bathroom. This is a distraction from our real problems. Who cares? Of course, every American has a unique identity. I am proud to be gay. I am proud to be a Republican. But most of all, I am proud to be an American.
Again, the question, who cares? Well, the bottom line is, I think I could be fair by saying this, some of the gay activists care, because this was not an issue, Kelly. Didn't you say that before? I mean, other people have said this has not really been an issue, but it was sort of forced as an issue.
It was brought from the left to the right, whether the people that brought the issue are gay or just on the left, because it's a way of going after some basic truths that we know about male and female. And when you go to those core issues, you advance the cause of the left, and eventually that translates into government power. I mean, we don't have time to talk about how that progression happens, but really just cutting into the moral fiber of the nation. It's been very obviously the Republican Party is a very big tent now. I mean, we heard it at this convention. It's a bigger tent than it was 4 years ago, and it. In a sense, some of the influence for marriage, it's already gone away because of the Supreme Court. It's too bad, but that's where we are.
Well, and what he said is, as a lot of times when you hear these people, I mean, it was disingenuous. Let's review real quickly what happened.
Yeah.
The law was fine. There was no problem in North Carolina until the city of Charlotte decided that they wanted to mandate that if you had a business or anything, that you had to let people who were male go into your female restrooms. And when they passed that in Charlotte, the state said, hold on a second here. We don't want, males going into the women's or girls' restrooms or showers or, facilities. And so as a state, they passed the law saying what? That you can do your own restrooms how you want to. They didn't force the issue. They left it the way it was before, that people could run their own establishments how they needed to run their own establishments. So this idea that, this issue was created by, conservatives or Christians or whatever, it's the exact opposite.
It just was the opposite.
Yeah. What they did in North Carolina with that HB2 or whatever it was, is they were very specific in letting there be freedom for the businesses to run their businesses how they wanted to run their businesses. Now, if you don't like how they run it, you can go somewhere else and put them out of business. That's the way things generally work in the United States.
Let me just mention that we have posted Penna Dexter's commentary, and we just played it once. We're going to play it again in about 20 minutes. But Penna, even there is a good example, because in your commentary you point out the fact that on one hand you have the head of PayPal, Peter Thiel, says, who cares? And on the other hand, you remind us in the commentary here that PayPal canceled a contract to build a 400-person call center.
Yeah, so he cares.
Yeah.
His company
cared a lot.
Took a big action.
Yeah. But this is all
silly.
about the governor. Let's say some nice things about the governor of North Carolina for a minute. We have a lot of listeners in North Carolina, and you had a chance to meet him and find out a little bit more about some of the behind the scenes, didn't you?
Yeah, I respect him greatly. We mentioned earlier how Mike Pence caved on the issue of the Religious Freedom Act. This was a governor who faced similar pressure of companies leaving. We had Bruce Springsteen cancel a concert. Ringo Starr canceled a concert. We had governors saying we're not going to have state any travel to the state, all kinds of threats made and actual actions taken against the state economically. But this governor stood strong. And, you know, he started when I heard him just in a small reception speak over the weekend, he talked about how the Human Rights Campaign has such an influence on so many companies. They're sort of a shakedown organization. And it reminds me of, you know, other times in history where this has happened. But Chad Griffin, who's president of Human Rights Campaign, actually visited the governor, and he told him that this identity issue, this gender identity issue, was going to be a weapon. It didn't use the word weapon, but it was going to be used. He wanted to change the means for people to enter restrooms and locker rooms from biological sex to gender identity. And, you know, they've done everything they can to try to make that happen, but this governor has stood strong against that, and he has even come to the point where he's been sued by the federal government. Actually, they sued first. They heard they were going to be sued by the federal government about this, and North Carolina pre-sued, kind of, you know, preemptively sued, and 23 states have joined them in suing the federal government about this overreach, really based on their suit is based on the 10th Amendment. States have rights to do whatever they want. If New York wants to say that you have to use the pronoun the person wants about their gender, New York can do that. But states like North Carolina who want to protect people, I mean, this is a privacy and security issue too. They should be allowed to do that. And so I was impressed by the governor and happy to be able to hear about the story.
Let's take another phone call real quickly, and we'll go to Dave, KAVX in Texas. Dave, thank you for joining us today here.
Yes, Kerby. I know it was our evangelicals that schooled Donald Trump on this issue, and I heard him speak out before on it. 1954 Johnson Amendment, as far as I'm concerned, is just as bad as Planned Parenthood. Way back in the day, I'm talking about when our founding fathers, they used to call them the Black Robe Regiment. That was the preachers. They were the ones who took up the guns and went after the British. Along comes Johnson, and he got whipped down there in Houston, almost lost the election because of a bunch of preachers that had some backbone back in the day, and his retaliation was, I'm going to take away your 501(c)(3). Well, he passed that Johnson Amendment, and there goes a backbone in our preachers. They're supposed to be a conscience of our congregations. And you hear all these preachers saying, oh, we shouldn't vote or anything. Well, the Bible clearly says we should be salt and light. And you have had Louis Gohmert on there, and he's talked about 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 14. And you know what that says, and a whole bunch of other things. And you have had a whole bunch of guests that have given us reasons why we need to vote. And probably the strongest one I can think of is, and he said this last night, and he's reiterated a bunch of times, he's got a list of 11 people. You're only happy with 9 of them, but Supreme Court justices.
Yep, and you got the point. When we come back, we're going to get into this. Kelly Shackelford has written about this. Matter of fact, one of the articles we posted today are 6 attacks on churches' religious freedom. We'll talk about that with Kelly Shackelford and take some more phone calls right after this.
What does a hero look like? I remember a woman stricken with MS. She was in a wheelchair, and every week after church, people would get down on a knee and greet her and pray for her. But do you know what caught my eye? The seemingly invisible man behind the wheelchair, silently caring for his beloved, sacrificing for her. In the Bible, Jesus talked about a big giver who had a marching band come with him as he dumped his treasure in the temple coffers. But Jesus saw a woman who gave a tiny gift that was actually huge. If you appreciate Point of View but can't give $30 or $65 or more, well, get this. If every listener gave $5, it would pay our bills for the next 3 years. 3 years. Give $5 today. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Thank you for being our hero. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, and again, it is weekend edition. We'll do our best to try to get in as many phone calls as we can, but certainly we want to talk about this issue of religious liberty for just a minute. David started us off with the 1954 Johnson Amendment. It was something that was just put forward to really kind of close down and prevent 501c3 organizations. At the time, it wasn't even a religious organization from actually being involved in politics, but it's been used against churches and pastors for years. And one of the assignments I give to you, as we always do, is to take an article that we've posted, and the first one we've posted here takes you to firstliberty.org, 6 attacks on churches' religious freedom. And there is a share button there, so you can put it on your Facebook page, you can put it on LinkedIn, you can put it on Twitter, or you can forward it. And I would encourage all of you that take the time to visit our website or just go to firstliberty.org to forward this to your pastor. And Kelly, what about this? Because what David was saying is that because of the 1954 Johnson Amendment, the possibility that churches could lose their tax-exempt status, it's kind of taken the backbone out of some pastors that should be preaching on these very important issues.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear that's misplaced. I mean, we have a material online that tells them, even under what the IRS says, what they can do and what they can't, and really it allows them to do pretty much anything they really want to do. But really, the IRS should have no authority to tell a church or a pastor anything about what they can do or not do as far as speak out. And that's, I think, Donald Trump's point. And when we had the meeting in New York, this was something evidently he had just found out about, because it wasn't anything that was really brought up by anybody there.
Yeah.
But boy, was he hot to trot on it. He and I think it's because he's got a lot of people who are evangelical Christians, who are pastors and others, and he learned that if they were to speak out, like from their pulpit or whatever, saying endorse Donald Trump, that they would actually lose their tax exempt status. And it was appalling to him. And his statement was, some guy on the street has more power than, all these religious leaders. He said, that's not right. That shouldn't happen in this country. So again, he mentions it,
he had it in the speech last night. I was surprised it was in the speech. Yeah.
Not only was it in there, it was the very last thing he said.
Yeah.
So again, kind of surprising, but I do think that's a burr in his saddle. He doesn't like that. And that's one of those things he's after. Yeah. The attacks on religious freedoms are really growing. So much so that even churches are now under attack. And so I think it's a good idea. If you're listening, your pastors probably don't know about these things. But you know what? This was in Iowa, okay? The one we're talking about in particular. The government, the state of Iowa, came into the church and said, we have a right to come into your church and to tell you what you can say in your church, doctrinally and otherwise, because if you say something that we feel like demeans or discriminates against somebody because they're transgender or they're, you name it, then you violate our state law. I mean, the gall for the government to think it can come into the church and tell you what your doctrine is, that should be a wake-up call. Again, this wasn't in, the People's Republic of Massachusetts or somewhere, right? This was in Iowa. And so it is a wake-up call. I would encourage people to get this and share this, because people need to know that this is going on all over the country, these kinds of attacks.
Let's again talk about the victory, because we always like to talk about those, and that is that you actually sent a demand letter saying that Iowa Code 216 should not apply to churches, and they agreed. But again, if you just look at the brochure, and you've made this available online, and they ask, for example, does this apply to churches? And the answer wasn't no. The answer was, well, sometimes. And then came up with an answer that says almost any church service could then put them in violation.
And who gets to decide?
Good.
The bureaucrats.
The state.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I think's neat. Our client was one church. Okay. Yep. It was Cornerstone. It was a Pastor Kerry Gordon and their church. And because that one church stood up and said, hey, wait a second, this can't happen, they backed up, they removed that off their brochure, they changed all that, which will affect every church in the state of Iowa. So it's a great example of how important it is for each of us to do our part, for each of us to be willing to stand up when these things happen, so that we provide freedom for everybody.
I encourage you to go to pointofview.net and look at the 6 attacks on churches' religious freedom, because, you know, we could look at this victory in Iowa, really, because of First Liberty, and say, well, good, they've took care of the problem. Well, no, because these things pop up all over the place. I mean, remember the Houston pastors, for instance.
Yes.
The mayor of Houston said, we want to see your sermons, because those sermons were affecting people's opinions on a certain issue. So, you know, it's something, it calls for constant vigilance. And I just would love to, know what you guys think. When we hear that Trump was very upset about the Johnson Amendment and wants to see it repealed, I mean, does that make you think? It kind of makes me think that he's got some religious freedom protective instincts inside there. Do you think so?
I think I think the proof of that is what he did with our Coach Kennedy case. You know, Coach Joe Kennedy went to a knee after the football game and was fired for going to a knee and thanking God for the privilege of coaching these young men. Donald Trump immediately, when this hit the press, I mean, we certainly didn't talk to him, tweeted and thought it was outrageous and was just incensed about it. When he was in New York and we had that meeting, he actually said he got in a lot of trouble with his campaign for doing that, and people criticized him for it. But he said it's wrong. We can't have this happening in our country. He said, if I'm president, this is not going to be happening. So there is some instinct there. I don't totally understand it all, but he definitely has an instinct there for on some of these religious freedoms issues to speak out on that.
Well, we've got two people that want to ask some questions about that. So, Kelly, I'll put you on the spot here and see if we can answer some of those. First, we'll go out to Alaska, KJNP. Timothy, I think you had some questions about Donald Trump's view of the Constitution and rule of law. Go for it.
Yes, here in Alaska, by the way, thank you, Mr. Anderson, for taking my call. And I'd like to say that here in Alaska, the Republican primary, the delegates went for Cruz. But that doesn't affect the way I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. And I would like to point out that here in Fairbanks, Alaska, the two biggest retailers, Safeway and Fred Meyer's, have added a third bathroom to their ensemble. It says other. It's available for mothers with kids or fathers with kids or unisex or gender misidentification. And I think that we should view this tolerance as a positive sign. It's not necessary for people to be ostracized because of their sexual identity. And I would just like to say that this format that you're providing for Christians and non-Christians to articulate their positions is a wonderful point that Donald would agree. The Constitution and rule of law trumps out the confusion that's going through most people's idea. And I want to thank you very much.
Thank you. One other one, let's go to South Carolina. Hugh, you've been looking at also some of the comments that Donald Trump has to say, so love to hear your comments about that.
Thanks, Kerby. It's probably not surprising that Donald Trump or someone who is really actively engaged in any profession for that matter may be out of touch with a number of things happening in our society and culture. And so there's a learning curve, I'm assuming, and I think it's apparent that there's probably a learning curve for him on a number of these issues. And so to that point, I think we need to give him a little bit of room to grow, I suppose, and to be informed. And in spite of the length of his speech and some of the rambling aspect of it, I thought the content was pretty good, could have been better organized and delivered more briefly. But the issue of the LGBTQ protection, while I agree with that fact that they should be protected, I also think I understood maybe from one of your comments or so forth there that maybe it wasn't really even necessary to emphasize that fact, because protection for all, red, yellow, black, or white, whatever your color, stripe, or whatever, protection for all from such
created in
terrorism.
the image of God. That's right.
Right, but also, since he did point that out, and I appreciate his acknowledgement of the evangelical impact, although he may not be worthy of it, as he said, but and that he's listening to people, I really would like to have heard him reference the importance of life at any stage, which he didn't really focus on too much, in the womb or whatever, but also to focus on religious liberty for people in the marketplace, in your business, and so forth.
Got it. Okay, we need to take a break, and we'll come back and talk about that. You can hear Penna Dexter's commentary right now.
Over the past few months, we have witnessed the emergence of a controversy over an issue most of us never saw coming. We have seen local governments and now the federal government attempting to force schools, businesses, and nonprofit organizations to open the showers, changing facilities, locker rooms, and bathrooms designated for women and girls to biological males, and vice versa. No elected official I know of has asked to be faced with this issue, but I met one the other evening who confronted it with great resolve and courage. He is Pat McCrory, governor of North Carolina. The governor described the day Chad Griffin, president of the Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest LGBT advocacy organization, sat in his office and told him that North Carolina was the epicenter of his organization's efforts to make gender identity the means for people to enter restrooms and locker rooms. What the HRC wants, says Governor McCrory, is a third status in addition to male and female: questioning. They want the few who are questioning whether they really want to be the sex they are anatomically to be able to use the facility of their choice. The HRC had already gotten to the city of Charlotte, which had placed a mandate on all private businesses to allow bathroom, locker room use based not on a person's biological sex, but on the gender identity they choose to identify as. The state swung into action to stop this craziness and to protect the security and privacy of its citizens. The legislature passed HB 2, the Public Facilities Privacy and Security Act, and Governor McCrory signed it. It affects public facilities. Private businesses and private universities and nonprofits can establish their own practices. The governor says North Carolina's schools and its rest stops were top of mind for him. How could he leave people using those bathrooms vulnerable? The response from the Human Rights Campaign was swift and sharp. Chad Griffin said to North Carolina, "You won't know what hit you." He wasn't kidding. Scores of companies said they'd rethink doing business in North Carolina. PayPal canceled a contract to build a 400-person call center. Deutsche Bank froze a 250-job expansion. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said HB 2 must be changed if the league's multi-day 2017 All-Star festivities are to remain in Charlotte. Bruce Springsteen and Ringo Starr canceled concerts. Conventions and events in the state were canceled. The federal government threatened to pull millions in education funding. Governor McCrory got wind of a civil rights lawsuit coming from the U.S. Justice Department. He sued them first, citing their baseless and blatant overreach in violation of the 10th Amendment. He was joined by 21 other states. Hours later, the Justice Department countersued. The left brought the issue to us, not the right. Many politicians have caved to these demands, but this governor is to be commended for standing strong. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And talking a little bit about the learning curve for Donald Trump with Penna Dexter and Kelly Shackelford. And again, we have this 6 attacks on churches as religious freedom, and I really encourage you to read that. But I have another assignment for them, Kelly, and that is they should post "In God We Trust." And we've made it you at First Liberty have made it very easy for people to do so.
Yeah, it's a response to the Freedom from Religion sending out these threatening letters to police chiefs and sheriffs and all that around the country to try to intimidate people from not displaying "In God We Trust." And so we thought, let's make them regret this. So people can go to firstliberty.org, and down towards the bottom of the page, they'll see the "In God We Trust" window clings. They're free. And just click on that, and you can order some. We have some, and just want to make sure that Point of View listeners know. now, it's in God we trust.
Amen.
I think we got a lot of issues that we need the Lord to intervene on.
Let me help you find it. Probably the best way to do it is click on where Kelly's picture is, because that will take you to the actual front page, and then scroll down about 2/3, and then you'll see on the left-hand side it says Claim Your Free In God We Trust window cling.
Yep.
You have so much material there that even I have trouble finding it, so I thought it'd make it real easy for everybody to find it. And as much as possible, we encourage as many of our point of view listeners to have a window cling on their truck or their car or their van or whatever. So that's just something we wanted to mention as another action item there as well. Penna, any thoughts about this whole issue of religious liberty? I think, as what I was hearing Hugh say, is we have to recognize that for some people like Mike Pence, he studied religious liberty for decades. But for Donald Trump, this is kind of new information for him, isn't it?
Well, Mike Pence studied religious liberty for decades, understands the issue, and in that one case disappointed us a little bit.
Yeah.
Donald Trump doesn't know the issue as well, but he's got some good instincts. And so I think, here at the end of Point of View, it's probably a very good opportunity to say we never can elect a leader and expect them to lead the way we want or to lead the country in a godly direction. We are not talking about church here. We're talking about politics. And so as believers, our stewardship is to get as involved as we possibly can for the right, for the good. And, this weekend I heard 6 members of the platform committee who served in crafting the Republican platform. And they were all speaking and talking about how they fought for certain parts of it. And it made you happy. But then, of course, you hear also that a platform is meaningless and it's only as good as how much you stick to it and the laws you pass. But all that to say is we have to stay involved. Election season, non-election season. We need to pay attention, and that's why Point of View exists.
And what's the most important thing on religious freedom? If you're looking at a president, it's really, who are they going to appoint to make those decisions on whether we're going to, have the constitutional religious freedom that our country was built upon? And so, that to me is the most important factor with a president. On the issue of religious freedom. Now, obviously, I'd love for him to speak and be very knowledgeable about it and be very strong and all that. And again, as Hugh says, on the Donald Trump side, he's probably learning a lot of things. But you know what? If you get the judges right, then we're going to have strong, vibrant religious freedom. And so that's really number one by far.
Penna mentioned platforms. We're going to probably talk a little bit more about that next week when we have a chance to look at both of those. But the Republican platform has been referred to as very far right by the New York Times. And yet the only real differences between the 2012 and 2016 is they want to build a wall rather than a fence and a few other things. So it is a little more conservative. But on the other hand, the Democratic platform is more liberal than anything you would have imagined. And you don't have to take my word for it. William Galston, who actually served in the Clinton administration, actually says that the party that Hillary Clinton will lead into battle this fall is not Bill Clinton's Democratic Party. It calls for a $15 an hour minimum wage. The platform a number of years ago talked about that the death penalty should not be arbitrary. This time it calls for the complete abolition of the death penalty. 4 years ago, they talked about a reasonable regulation of guns. This time they want to essentially overturn the Second Amendment. And so this week, I really encourage our listeners to pay attention, because the Democratic platform, because of, I think, the Bernie Sanders delegates, is much more liberal than it was just 4 years ago. And I didn't know there was much room over there to the left.
Yeah, I didn't either, but he did extract some concessions, and many of those probably will show up in the platform.
Well, and again, we'll probably put both the platforms up there and do some analysis. But let's take at least one more phone call. We've talked about Ted Cruz. There was another issue, and that was Melania Trump. And so Susie in Missouri would like to weigh in with that. Susie, you have the floor. What would you like to add?
Yes, I'd like to talk about the defamation of character of Melania Trump, Donald Trump's wife. She's a beautiful woman. She's honest. She's just. She's kind. She's fair. And this is what happened on Stephen Colbert's late night show. And, of course, also there is Jerry Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, and Seth Rogen on their other own late-night shows. Now, they had a slightly different format, but Stephen Colbert's, I thought his was the worst. He maligned and portrayed Melania Trump, a wife, a mother, as a call girl, prostitute, and hooker, and as an ignoramus. I think that is very cheap, low, tawdry, disgraceful, and immoral on Stephen Colbert's part. He has shamed and disgraced. This is shameful and disgraceful to every woman, every wife and mother in this United States of America. Shame on him. I wouldn't even think of doing something like that to Hillary Clinton or Michelle Obama, would you?
Yeah.
You, Stephen Colbert, you would. So take your hair balls, your fur balls, your dust bunny balls, located in your brain, go right to the middle aisle of the Democratic Convention with everything going on there, and we take your entourage with you, your late night entourage with you, Jimmy Fallon, Jerry Kimmel, Seth Rogen, and go straight up to Hillary Rodham Clinton on her platform and on the stand there, and loudly say and speak, "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be here, Hillary Clinton. You shouldn't be running for president. You shouldn't be running for president, Hillary Clinton."
Yeah. Sounds like you've written a lot of that. I hope that you maybe put it as an email or a letter to the editor or something like that.
Just thought it out.
Yeah, it's really good. And again, the plagiarism thing, of course. But if you don't have anything else to talk about, I guess that's what they spent this week talking about.
There's a reason why Stephen Colbert is performing the worst of the late night talk shows.
That's for that reason.
Because of his liberalism.
Yeah.
That's just, that doesn't go over well with American people. And so Susie's recognizing it. And so she's just going to add to his problems, I guess, with regard to viewers.
Well, again, if you want to talk about the way in which we treat women in America, look at how they treated Melania this week. Pretty sad.
It's hard to ask the American culture to inject sort of civility into political campaigns. But this one's been a rough one, and, I would hope that maybe we could pull back a little bit sometimes in future campaigns. We'll see.
That would be nice. The candidates haven't helped.
Absolutely not.
The candidates started it. I don't know. I don't think it's going to get better. I'm afraid it's going to get worse. And these negative ads are going to be coming fast and furious. Next week, of course, is the Democratic National Convention. We'll have a chance to play a few of the clips each day. And then, of course, next Friday, we'll look at those. But let me give you an advance warning that we will look a little bit at these platforms, because even though some candidates ignore them, Kelly, you've been on the platform committee, and you recognize that still really, in a sense, establishes the identity of a party, doesn't it?
Yeah. Don't let anybody kid you. The platforms are essentially the Bible of the party. I mean, they've got to have something that says what they stand for. And even if the president says, well, I'm not going to follow this and that and whatever, there's a whole lot of other offices all over the country that is going to be sort of the plumb line for what it means to be in that party. So they're very important, and they do have an impact, and they reflect what the grassroots of that party really does stand for.
We talk about a divided country. Just look at the division between the two party platforms. That tells you a lot. Well, we're out of time, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Next week, of course, we'll be not only interviewing a number of guests, but also giving you a chance to hear a little bit of what happened on the Democratic National Convention. And I certainly want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Shamila for their help behind the scenes. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
What can you get for $5? In most cases, you can't even get a value meal at a fast food restaurant. But I'll tell you one thing $5 can do. If every listener to Point of View sent just $5 this week, believe it or not, and someone here did the math, Point of View could pay the bills for the next 3 years. That's what the number said. $5, 3 years. That's how many of you there are and how little it takes to keep us going. The problem is, most of our listeners have never contributed. Never. To make up for those who don't, others give large gifts, hundreds, even thousands, or monthly donations of $30, $65, $100. I don't know what you can do, but I encourage you to do what you can today, even if that's $5. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send your gift to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Thank you for doing your part for Point of View. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.